right and wrong?
Duh.
What is good and bad?
I always refer to myself as a contrarian.
The search for common sense and the defense of free speech.
Duh.
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 Oh.
I mean,
Hey! Hello!
we can start it at any time.
Is this all going to be part of the show now?
It may or may not be.
Fuck.
I feel like we do this every time. Every time I ask you, you put it in the show.
I may or may not. Jake just blew our FCC regulations.
All right, well, welcome back to the Duh podcast. We have a guest that needs no introduction because he is super famous in the world of physics and philosophy.
Yes, I do want to start this off by saying that I am an expert, just in a general sense. I'm just expertise on everything.
And if you're going to write a paper, you can cite this as an official per the podcast. No, without further ado, also to note, this is an interview in person, our first one.
Yep.
We don't have to have three people all Skyping around the world because he lives relatively close, from my understanding, to Michael's studio. Is that correct?
That's
guys?
right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mr. Jacob McGovern.
You had one job. Just Jake.
Just Jake.
Just Jake.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah. Jake is no relation to me. Jake McGovern, Michael McGovern, no relation.
Pure chance.
Well, last episode we had Ruben Sevilla, who was the Venezuelan journalist covering the riots in the streets of Venezuela. And Duh Podcast took a few advertising liberties and took advantage of a free Facebook ad credit and advertised on Facebook to a bunch of Venezuelans, and the likes got the post got over 7,000 likes. So either we're off to a running start with the Duh Podcast, or we're gonna have a lot of angry Venezuelans who thought this was the resistance radio.
Who knows though? Maybe they'll really enjoy what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. We could get someone to do this in Spanish too. We could have a transcript underneath.
I think today's topic is going to be very fascinating because Jake, we haven't said much about you, but he is an expert in pineapples. So we're going to talk about pineapples, how they all work, origin, the arguments behind them.
Before you turn this podcast off, Jake, give the folks a chance to understand why they should care about pineapples.
So, it's a really underappreciated topic, I think, today. It's really not getting the attention that it deserves. Mm-hmm. Pineapples are, they are the way forward, in my opinion. They're the solution to everything. It's really a cure-all.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I go the other way on pineapples. I think that it's toxic. I think that it's a cause for a lot of the horrible things that have been happening, and I guess we can stop this charade.
I think you're just trying to be divisive. Don't embarrass our pineapple expert over here. Let him have his say.
So no, but are pineapples? Do they have fractals, Jake?
Oh my god. I don't even know how to answer that.
All right, let me ring this in before it gets out of control.
I think you're a little late.
I already poured my scotch. We're gonna have some time.
Jake is my brother. Tommy, I think you and me can agree. One of the smartest person we know, maybe.
Jake, it's annoyingly smart. He's annoyingly smart. He knows everything. Every time I talk to him, I learn something. I try to debate him, and I usually just get angry. That's what you do when you start to lose. You just get louder.
The trick is to just be really arrogant and not listen to anyone else. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about.
No, I think it's really fascinating what the way Jake's brain works, and we've been dying to get him on. He does study physics in school, right, Jake? Want to give us a little background on you?
Yeah, I'm in school right now. I'm not taking physics, but I did take it in high school.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm majoring in computer science, and
Computer science.
yeah.
Computer science and physics aren't the same thing.
Well,
Tad different.
tad different.
Tommy, can you take us back to the day you called Jake out of the blue and asked him a question?
So we can just repeat that conversation because it was so freaking fascinating. But basically, Michael and I, when we first started talking about doing a show, before we got started, I said, Mike, where do you get all of this stuff, right? You're so knowledgeable and you're so passionate about so many things. He said, honestly, my brother. I talked to him, and we'll just talk for 5.5 hours, and then and then wake up and continue the conversation. He's like, you gotta talk to him. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call him, right? I'm gonna call him after work today. And he says, okay, but if you call him, you have to just ask him what fractals are, and it'll stimulate a great conversation. I said, Mike, what are fractals? And Mike said, you got to call Jake. So I remember this day perfectly because I'm in an Uber. I'm thinking this is going to be a 10-minute conversation. Mind you, I haven't spoken to Jake in probably like 6 months, I want to say. No text, no phone call. I just, last time I saw him was 6 months ago. And I call him, and he's like, oh, cousin Tommy, hey. And I say, Jake, what are fractals? I've obviously said that, expecting a laugh because I didn't say hi. I didn't say, how have you been? I just said, what are fractals? And Jake without missing a beat, just goes in to this amazing explanation, which led to a 2.5 hour conversation between Jake and I, where we talked about everything from fractals and sacred geometry to determinism
Memes.
to memes.
Yes.
Learned a lot about memes. We're going to bring that up later. Social viruses and construct, all a bunch of fun stuff. So I think the best way to start this conversation off is, Jake, what are fractals?
Well, fractals are a mathematical shape, sort of, and they are, I believe, defined by having the same amount of complexity and pattern to them at any given scale. So it's like a repeating but potentially infinitely complex pattern. And they're really interesting because they actually exist in between dimensions. So if you think about a square, it's a 2-dimensional shape. A cube is 3-dimensional. A fractal is actually in between those, so it can be a 2.5 dimensional shape, which is just kind of insane. I don't really know enough to really speak about them, but I just think there's a lot of things that you see a lot of fractal-like shapes in nature, and it's kind of leading me to the possibility that on a really large scale, everything could be a really complicated fractal.
And that's the idea. Is it's from my understanding, Jake, right? It's people take this geometric shape and argue that we live inside another person's brain, right? Or we live inside a computer program, or theories spawn from this, right?
Sure. Yeah, you get
Not saying you subscribe to those theories, but in case our listeners haven't, maybe are thinking if they remember this. Also, I think a layman's term is flower of life symbol. People get tattooed on that. I don't think they have no idea. They don't have any idea what it means, but it's similar, right? I don't know if you've heard of that, or either of you guys.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Oh, no, it's a hippie thing.
I remember seeing the thing that kind of made it click for me was I remember it was a pretty famous meme that went around the internet, and you probably maybe have come across it, where it had the circulation system, like pictures of blood vessels, next to an overview shot of a river running through a valley, and then and then next to that it was like 3 pictures. The third picture was like a Hubble telescope takes a picture of the universe, and they all look eerily similar. Like, and then it also had a city, because there's like, you know, like blood vessels run through your body, the rivers run through mountains, highways run through cities, and then the picture of the universe was like almost like a highway of different galaxies and stars. And that's what made it click for me. I was like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. It's like a shape or pattern of organization that you see in all places in the universe. Is that kind of right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting. You see it popping up in places that you would, you know, never expect. A big problem with genetics is that, you know, there's not enough information in our genome to account for the complexity of our brains, and that's like a really, you know, confusing. Like, how can that be? And the reason that's possible is because our genes are, you know, more or less they have a fractal pattern to them to basically give us this you know, potential complexity. Like, it gives us the structure for our brains, which then we can interact with our environment to actually shape our understanding. But yeah, you see it just basically everywhere. So like, we are I think there's 2 ways to kind of look at it. That possibly reality itself is a fractal type, you know, mathematical structure or whatever, or we like life is, you know, given that it's like a self-replicating thing, it could be that we have evolved in a fractal way, and the way we interact with the universe is like through that lens. So I don't know, kind of 2 possible takes on it.
And I read that article that those astronomers said that they took a like really wide scale picture of the universe, and it didn't seem to be in the fractal pattern, which could put a damper on that theory. But what would you, how would, even if that's true, even if like they took if they were able to get a bigger scale view of the universe, and the fractal pattern broke down. Well, actually, before I say that, I mean, just to give people an idea of like what a fractal looks like. I mean, you can Google it obviously, but it's like the Legend of Zelda. You know, like the triangles, like the 3 triangles in one triangle. It's like what how would you define it? It's like a pattern that if you like its smaller parts are equal to its bigger parts, right?
Right. The measure of complexity is the same on every scale.
Yeah, but it keeps growing outward.
Or what do you mean?
Well, like, you know those fractal videos where you look and it just like sucks you down a
Right. Yeah. So it's
vortex.
infinitely complex. Like, you can have a enclosed space which has, or like an enclosed shape which has an infinite perimeter. So like a 2-dimensional shape, which, you know, its area is defined, but the perimeter is infinite, because the more you zoom in, the more you realize that it's longer and longer. That's what a big problem with measuring borders for countries was. You get like people measuring with a, you know, a mile long measuring stick, and they miss all the complexities of the actual border. So the more accurate of a measurement you take, the longer actual perimeter you're going to find. And that was a big problem for understanding how people are measuring the same place and getting these wildly different estimates, because they're using a different scale of measurement, of estimation.
So, Jake, tell me. I remember when we started talking about the fractal in the brain, it led to, you know, eventually led to like that determinism. Was the first time I started really started opening my mind to that. I don't remember the connection of how we got from fractal in brain to lack of free will, but do you think you can walk me through that, or maybe I'm off? Maybe that there is no connection.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a direct connection, but if you like grant determinism, or you know, a more or less, like obviously quantum physics kind of like overthrows the basic understanding of determinism, but if you accept like a causal connection between, you know, points in time and reality, then and we observe that I don't know. I'm like totally losing my thought. Because that's a tough jump. Because I don't really remember exactly how we went from fractals to
Yeah, so I remember we were talking about you alluded to this idea that like the same pattern in your neural network is the same in the universe, and it's a I mean fractal's a pattern, right? It's a like you described it earlier, an infinitely complex pattern, but the like looking at the pattern in the brain, you can you started to talk about like how there's that everything came from this pattern in life, and kind of went through the causal chain from the Big Bang and led all the way up to what we do. Every decision that we make, isn't actually our decision. And then that's when I remember you going into something like that. That's when I stopped you. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I just remember like I'm probably missing a big chunks of how we got there. But that's where I was very in disbelief, I guess, right? Of like, what do you mean? What do you mean the world is predetermined? What do you mean I'm not capable of making my own decisions? With someone who had zero knowledge of determinism, or even played with the idea that we have no free will, it's a really, really difficult pill to swallow. It's like I reject it immediately.
Yeah.
I think like most people you meet, just walk around with a belief of like subjective dualism, let alone libertarian free will.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be like the prevailing assumption. Because like unless you're like seriously challenged on or considering it, that's kind of the natural way of being. Because there's no evolutionary benefit to thinking that you're not in control of your actions.
Right.
So, I don't know why we would. Yeah.
I successfully segued to the determinism discussion. There was actually nothing to do with fractals. I just danced until we. Mike, can you? You're good at this. Can you for the people who don't know what determinism is? Can you spell it out in a way? Or?
Well, yeah, it's just the belief or theory that everything is caused by something else, and that from the moment of the beginning of time till now, everything that's happened has been a result of cause and effect, and that includes the actions of people and animals and biological beings and all that stuff, which would, right? I mean that would include, for instance, like if you wake up in the morning and you always have coffee in the morning, but this morning you decided to get tea. The idea is that it's not the ego, the when you say I am me, I am Michael, I am Jake, I am Tommy, when you say that, like that thing inside of you that you call yourself, like that isn't the thing that decided you would have tea that morning instead of coffee. It was a combination of just 1,000 different influential outside forces on your brain, which are controlled by your genes, which are controlled by your ancestors, and they go all the way back to when we were single-celled organisms and all that stuff, right? So that it's a very heated topic of discussion usually, because people lash back at it because they don't want to think that they're not in control of their actions, and they also, like, if they accomplish something, they want to feel accomplished, and if they do something bad, you're probably more likely to be like, okay, I like that idea better,
Yeah, they've done experiments where they have people read a passage, either affirming free will, either reading that or one that's affirming determinism, and after they read that article, like people who read the thing saying that they don't have free will, they're more likely to commit an immoral act, either like cheating or stealing something. So there's definitely like a danger in how people like integrate this knowledge, knowledge as if it's certainly true, but how they integrate that into their psychology. There's definitely a potential risk.
Yeah.
I know, listening to a few much more well-studied people like Daniel Dennett, he that's basically his position, is that we shouldn't be telling people that they don't have free will, because it will have there are actual serious consequences to thinking that, or potentially, even if I don't believe that's entirely correct.
Yeah, and this sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
This is like the crux of the truth debate between like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, and then sort of same thing with Daniel Dennett had a long argument about this with Sam Harris, because it comes down to the fundamental thing of like, what is truth? Is truth like actual observable reality that's completely objective, even though it's impossible to be completely objective about observing reality, or is truth something that benefits survival of people? Where that's what I think maybe Daniel Dennett is afraid of, is if people buy into the idea of determinism, even if all the evidence, scientific evidence, suggests that determinism is a fundamental nature of reality, is that a good or bad thing for humans or intelligence? Is that kind of a good?
No, I mean, we've had numerous debates about this. I immediately side with it is bad and should not be talked about, even though we're talking about it on our platform with our millions of listeners.
Right.
Let me just unpack a few things though that we talked about, because it's heavy stuff. First, Mike talks a lot about the self, right? And we've also had a lot of debates about that, right? Like, what is the self? I think it's important to define that because we're going to refer to it quite a bit, I'm sure. We're not talking about the whole person, right? We're not talking about like my brain, body, everything, right? We're talking about the person, the passenger, right? The one inside your body. Like if you lose your hand, it's like I lost my hand, right? When people have this general feeling like they're riding around in their bodies, right? And it's like there's an I behind the eyes, right? There's a me behind my eyes, and that we just kind of feel like this consciousness in our head, and that we're thinkers of our thoughts, right? We're the authors of our own thoughts.
Yeah.
Which is impossible. It's not true, as we know now. But then furthermore, the feeling of being the source of your will and cognition, the feeling of being the center of the experience, rather merely being identical to the totality of your experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where I think the thing that I've come to learn is we're 100%, like I think it's the truth now that we're not the authors of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Like before we get into the moral responsibility piece, right, which seemed like that's where the conversation was going. I think we all believe, we all disavow the libertarian free will. All three of us.
Which
right?
is like, can you define that really quick?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, libertarian free will is the idea that you have, you're independent from all causation. You are always 100% in control of your decisions and your actions. But there's no other controlling metric in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that right, Jake?
I think one quote that I like is well, actually, yeah, I just want to say, like, most like philosophers, I believe, like the most common position is that of compatibilism, which is stating that even if the universe is deterministic, we still have a kind of free will. But what I think they're arguing for is basically just a like non-existent thing. Like even if you accept that this version of free will is true, or you think that's an acceptable way to use that word, it doesn't really change anything, because they say like you can choose what you want, but you can't will what you want. So you may be able to choose between coffee or tea in the morning, but you can't choose to want that thing.
Yeah.
So when I think I heard Dan Dennett say this, when a when you go sign something, they say, "Are you signing this on the free will of your own?" Right? And because there is a kind of free will that exists where you no one's forcing you to do something. Right?
Yeah, you're free from coercion.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point, because there's like a philosophical free will, and then there's like a political free will.
Mm-hmm.
Like are my actions controlled and observed and coerced by the state? Which I think they're always, no matter where you live, it has a little influence. And so yeah. Anyway, like for instance, like you would say that Americans have free will, whereas most North Koreans don't. But that's like in the terms of like a political free will, like your ability to act out impulses in a relatively free way,
Right.
that is based on some moral system, like not act out like murder anyone you want, but that you have more freedom to, like a more spectrum of behavior that you can dance with, that you can make love to, if you will.
But so I guess when I do subscribe to the I think it's hard not to, that there's influences and there's a causal chain that led me to have this conversation right now and say the thing I'm about to say next.
Yeah.
Right. But I still have a choice in my mind. Like even though I've been influenced, at the end of the day, I still make a decision.
Right. I think it depends on what you mean by I. Descartes' famous, I think, therefore I am. I think one problem with that is that...
Descartes, famous philosopher, his famous line, I think, therefore I am.
Yes. Probably the most, like the E equals MC squared of philosophy. Yeah. Like the most well-known thing. But I think it's there's no reason to call that thing that makes decisions I, or that thinks the thoughts I. Feeling like there's a separate self that is controlling these things. I think that's an illusion, and there's no argument to, at least that I've come across, that to be made that that it is in fact your identity making these decisions.
But okay, so I'm observing my thoughts. I mean,
right.
you can do that through meditation, right? Like you don't have to prove that. Everybody can sit there and think and observe what the thought's happening. Or even if you think of a dream, right? You look back and you're obviously not in control of that dream. So the observer of the thoughts can't he or she, the observer, observe the thoughts and then use that to make to influence the next thought, which would then therefore make their decision?
Right. So you can always take it a step further by saying, removing yourself one more degree from your decision. But no matter how many times you do that, there's always going to be some underlying causal structure allowing you to do it. So even if you're sitting there observing your thoughts and trying to select from them, that selection process is also determined by your physiology, by physics. So no matter how many times you want to say, like, okay, fine, I might not be able to, there might be some influences, but I can still do this, make this decision. There's still going to be, influences on that, and you say, well, no, okay, even if those are true, I can still, step back and observe that process. There's ultimately always going to be a bedrock of causation.
Who's observing the observer? And who's observing that observer?
Yeah.
And who's observing that observer?
Hurdles all the way down.
Well, I think that's where it's hard. Like we always just end up disagreeing about this one piece, because you believe that the observer, as I refer to him as the observer of thought, you think is an illusion, right? You don't think it's actually real.
Yeah, so I think the illusion does exist. So I mean, you can say that there is an observer, but the only reason that exists is because it's evolutionarily beneficial. That is basically your prefrontal cortex making decisions about the information that the rest of your brain provides it. So it's just another process in the brain.
So, what would the evolutionary benefit be of believing that there is an I behind yourself and all your thoughts?
It's not so much that the benefit is believing that; it's that having that experience, of distinguishing your body from your environment. That's what is useful, because if you can't tell the difference between that rock over there and your hand, then you're going to get yourself hurt. So I think it's more of a byproduct of self-serving drives, and then once we developed language, we since we're social creatures, we needed the concept of I, and that's kind of created some problems just because of the associations with it.
Yeah. So, really quick, for Descartes, you said, I think, therefore I am. Didn't someone make an amendment on that? Wasn't it something like, we think, therefore?
Oh, yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. I wish I remembered the name of the guy, but it was, very similar, I think, independent statement. It was like, we think, therefore I am, or something like that.
Something like that,
But I think, that's an interesting take, where it's like, the only reason we have this concept of I is because we have others to compare ourselves to. So if we were, solitary creatures as opposed to like existing in social groups, then we would not have developed this ego or observer of thoughts, at least independent of like you would in relation to your environment, but you wouldn't have the same kind of self-conception.
Yeah. Maybe it's the social hierarchies themselves that lead you to develop a sense of I, based on where you are in that hierarchy.
Right. Yeah.
I think one thing that flipped the switch for me when I was just thinking about this determinism thing was, Jake, I remember we were in Mexico driving, and you were reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like my favorite book of all time. And something else I said to Jake, like a couple weeks ago, I was like, I feel like you're 4 years ahead of all of my philosophical realizations. like you were like showing me this passage in the book that's like, he was like, the fundamental nature of everything is a pattern, and it's like all patterns, and then you like highlighted it. And I was like, why? I don't get it. Like, what? And I had read the book, and I had suggested it to Jake. And then, like, 4 years later or something, I'm like, oh, okay, now I get it. And Jake, what? You were, like, 16, 15 at the time? Or something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah, and so that's the flip that switched for me when thinking about all this, is, like, trying to figure out, like, if it's me that's in charge of all my decisions, or if it's, the collection of my brain and everything else. Is if you look back on your life and you don't look at it as a story, or you don't look at it as like you're the hero of your story, but instead you observe behavioral patterns that you have. Because if you go day to day and you like watch yourself and reflect with yourself of what you do and like all the behavior that you exhibit, and then you're able to control those behavioral patterns and change them somewhat, but it's still difficult. Like you're set in a pretty set pattern.
Right. I think that's the upside of or the belief in the lack of free will, because if you believe that you are ultimately you are in control, then you are, at least in my view, you're going to have a false sense of basically of control. So if you accept that there's no free will and you see that these are all processes, then you can, in some sense, take use those to your benefit. So,
okay, but also if I'm going to accept this metaphysical notion of unconscious causation, right? Like I feel like I would do less. I wouldn't push. I would start to lose willpower.
Yeah, that's
and that could be a problem because right now I do feel like I am. I mean, I believe that I'm in control of my future. I believe I'm in control of how I want my life to turn out, and just that belief, I feel it's hard to argue that belief in that doesn't it only helps. So the opposite would lead me to believe that it could only hurt. Like if I truly adopted the determinism theory and said that no matter how hard I push, no matter how hard I try, life is it's already predetermined. Then, well, let me just sit back and relax, right? I mean,
but look at the other side of the coin. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but what if something goes terribly wrong for you? Then your psychology is vulnerable to having like a breakdown, because then you're like, oh yeah, I thought I was in control of everything. So that could be a benefit.
True, except that yes, I mean, if everything goes wrong and I blame myself, right, for my life going wrong, then blaming yourself having that accountability can get you to also believe that you can turn it around,
right,
and believe that you can make something happen. Whereas if it's like, oh, that was just supposed to happen, I feel like that's taking on more of a victim mentality and just like, well, this sucks.
Yeah, that's true.
But this is what sparked the whole truth debate, right? Is because if we were to get an insight in, like, we looked under the covers and we said, oh, right, I'm the only one in the world. Let's pretend I'm the only one in the world that was able to, look under the covers and see what the truth is. And truth turns out that determinism is real. There is no free will. There is no self. Like, do you share that with the world? And my answer was always no.
I'd say not necessarily, because I mean, communication can obviously cause harm. It can do more harm than like, even if it's true, it's not necessarily going to be like good to share it at any given time. But I think ultimately, we're going to reach this point where you
Okay. Go ahead.
Wow.
So I think
I willed myself to sneeze.
So I actually think that's potentially true. That right now maybe it's not the best thing to be spreading this idea that everything is predetermined. That society at large, it's going to have a net negative effect on it.
And the underlying belief in that being that determinism leads to nihilism.
How so?
Because if people adopt that mode of thinking, they accept that truth, then a lot of what religion claims to help people with is to, like, make them the hero of their own story, right? So that like your fear of not sharing that, by saying not necessarily you don't want to share that information, is that it will lead people to be like, oh, I'm not responsible for myself, and therefore I'm not responsible for whatever I do, but good or bad, and nothing. Well, if I'm not the author of things, what's the point of anything? What am I supposed to do?
And just to back that up, I 100% agree with that statement, Michael. And because it happened to me. I mean, I feel like as soon as when Jake told me, I went all in on the determinism, and I feel like I experienced some nihilism. Like once I was like, well, this is true. Well, then nothing matters.
Yeah.
Nothing matters. There's no point to anything. I mean, those were real feelings, and it's very unpleasant feelings. And I think that, and this is going to actually argue against my last point, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that maybe my psychology was protecting myself from nihilism, which is why now I argue for a free will compatibilism, argument. And that also makes me think that maybe that's what guys like Dan Dennett did, and the whole compatibilism thing is really just their psychology protecting themselves from a form of nihilism.
Yeah. And Do you think there's Jake? Do you think there's emotion behind that? Like how do logic and emotion? That's something I'm like I don't know anything about. I'm like, how are logic and emotion connected?
I'm not sure how to answer that. What exactly is that?
Well, if people like Dan Dennett or Jordan Peterson, they're obviously driven by something that's a little different than just pure logic, right? Like people, if people, or how do I explain this? Like, you know how you're talking about, like, you can't will yourself to drink the tea instead of the coffee?
Yeah.
You can choose, but you can't will yourself.
You can't will your desire to do that.
Right.
Even if you follow your desire.
Right. So that you could take the same thing, like, I can't will myself to believe in religion again. I just don't believe in, like, you know, certain whatever, you know, Abrahamic religions. Like, but there's an emotion behind everything. Behind all of your logic, like there's an emotion that leads you to study what you study.
Right. Yeah, there's an underlying drive.
Right.
Yeah, we're not totally rational beings. We're obviously, you know, complex part of a whole, you know, emotional and sensational organism that's attached to it. But yeah, I think the you know, gut reaction or you know, first response to hearing this stuff, you know, I totally agree. Like, I went through like a, you know, nihilistic kind of view. I think that's ultimately wrong, and clinging to this belief in free will is, you know, ultimately or inevitably going to be a negative thing. So I think eventually you're going to have to, you know, face these truths about reality, and have to develop a better understanding. You know, everything that doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and so if you can successfully integrate these beliefs into yourself without, you know, abandoning all values and becoming nihilistic, then you're going to be stronger for it.
That's a bold claim, though, because you're kind of gambling with the world going to hell in a way of things got to get worse before they get better type of philosophy.
The dark is always... Wait, what is it? The night is always darkest before the dawn. Not true, by the way. That's like the famous quote from Batman. It definitely just progressively gets lighter as it gets closer to dawn.
But like the calm before the storm.
Right,
no, wait,
right.
That's the, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that seems like an unnecessary gamble. Like I feel like people are happy with. I mean, there's not suffering with the belief in free will. I don't see how like risking a lot of suffering with the hopes that it'll get better and we're all evolved and are happier at the end of the storm, right?
Oh,
like
it's not so much just a hope; it's that we have to. I mean, we're in the direction we're headed. You know, when we get, you know, complete successful control of genetic engineering and you know, just this is where, you know, reality is going. We are going to have complete control over, you know, basically our you know, every aspect of our lives. And if we cling to this belief in free will, it's only going to interfere with our ability to, you know, actually take control of our existence. So it may not be, you know, essential that, you know, this might not be the most pressing topic right now. There's a lot more, you know, there's bigger fish to fry, so to speak, right now.
Like what?
Like
religion?
Oh, I just mean like you know, more pressing problems.
Like the fact that almond butter is $15 a jar.
Exactly. That's what we need to be focusing our attention on.
That's ridiculous.
Side note: I just got sunflower seed butter.
Oh,
it's freaking amazing.
Oh, I hate that.
It's so good.
It is the worst thing in the world, and I'm...
By the way, guys, we're brought to you by sunflower seed butter. Pick up your local jar for $27.
Just any sunflower seed butter.
Yeah. We endorse them all.
They're not exactly paying us yet.
That's why we don't have the brand yet. Open-ended.
Insert sunflower seed butter brand here.
I love how we go from nihilism to sunflower seed butter.
No, I mean, I get that, though, Jake. I think you're right. I think that we're not ready for it, and I think that's what you've always said every time I ask you that question, because we have debated the truth topic
You guys
quite a bit.
hold down the fort. I gotta go to bed.
Okay. We debated that truth. I want to talk bad about Michael right now.
Yeah.
Michael is gone, so he's so dumb. Huh?
I can't believe you would say that.
What?
By your
Now I
own
look
free
like a
will,
jerk.
too. I mean, I'm a nihilistic, determinist, and I would never even say that. Oh, come on.
All right. Well, now I just seem like a jerk. He'll probably edit this out anyway. So we've debated that truth topic, right? And that's the whole Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris thing. Is Jordan Peterson says whatever benefits the world is truth, right? And Sam Harris says, no, there's still a truth.
Yeah.
Whether or not it benefits the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the noble lie, saying something that's not true because it's in the best interest of someone. And I feel like, if you abandon this notion of truth, of holding truth in like the highest regard, then you're basically, that's going to people are going to tend to believe things that benefit them. And that's not, on a large scale going to be the best for, everything as a whole. So if I, I'll try to think of an example. I don't know, if you just disregard everything that is painful to believe, then you're basically just going to be, living a lie, and that's ultimately going to come back to bite you in the butt,
Because we've all, even if we haven't personally experienced this, we've seen it in movies or other things where like someone's older, like they've kind of lived a lot of their life, but something catastrophic happens and they can't face it because they're so used to thinking that everything's okay. Right?
Yeah.
And then that has consequences.
So, like, for example, the lie that one of the oldest lies is, the belief in, or the notion that there's a hell, right? And you get eternally tortured if you were a bad person. It was, I think, invented to have a way of keep making people good people, right? And it's a very powerful belief that was a very or a very powerful lie that was sold. If you want to look at it. However, it also gets people to be a good person even when no one's watching, because they believe that they don't want to go to hell and they're terrified to be tortured for eternity. So, you all of a sudden you have people, and then you have people that get really into it and risk their lives to help other people. So, even though it's a lie, I mean, I see it as it's hard to argue that it doesn't make people better people, that they wouldn't have otherwise done those great things if it weren't for the religious dogma.
Yeah.
So, you don't believe in hell?
There is no. That's
Right.
No, I don't.
So, do you think that you're a worse or less moral person because of it?
No, of course not. But if I did believe in hell, if I truly believed that if I don't be nice to everybody all the time, right, or if I don't fly to Africa and give them food, that I'm going to hell, and I truly believed that, then I don't know. Maybe I would be a better person than I am now. Maybe I would spend my spare time, not doing podcasts, but help feeding the homeless.
Okay. But you do have to take it into consideration how holding that belief actually affects your reality. Because, I mean, if your belief in eternal torture is part of your day-to-day experience, you have to, every decision you make, you compare it to, you know, the potential that you're going to be burning in hell forever, then is that really going to make your experience of reality better? If you're on a day-to-day basis, every decision you make, you think, if I don't behave
Fair.
this way, I'm going to...
Fair. So let me flip it then. That if I go do all these great things, if I fly around the world and feed the homeless and risk my life to make people to help people's have happier experiences, I'll go to paradise.
Okay. Right.
I mean, how would that affect my reality? It seems, I don't know. I feel like maybe I'd even be a happier person.
There's a few people that flew airplanes into buildings that believe that.
I was waiting for one of you to say that. That's why it depends on the religious dogma.
Yeah.
I mean, no, but I mean, we laugh about that, but truly, they're like, and I'm probably going to get, you know, if this podcast ever goes big, I'll probably get in trouble for saying this, but that's why, you know, Christianity text and a Judaism text are far better than Islam.
Yeah, there's some people that would like point to old stuff in the Old Testament. And Jake, you have a favorite quote about she bear, right? Wait, tell that. Just give us like the spark notes on that Bible story about the she bears.
Oh my gosh, I forget what book it is, but yeah, the Old Testament. It's a story. You know, I'm sure there's more metaphorical meanings behind it, probably, but it's about a man being made fun of for being bald by some kids, and he gets really upset about it. So he tells God, or he tells God about it, and God basically sends a couple of female bears to go and maul the children. And,
They got what was coming. Someone essentially made fun of Larry David's bald head, and got mauled by a bear.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't denying the fact that there are things in the Old Testament or New Testament, but it was more of a separate statement that I felt like I wanted to mark, was that there are certain religious dogmas that can be beneficial and some that can be extremely harmful.
Yeah, that's like the crux of Sam Harris's thesis on most of his anti-religious stuff, is like, don't equate freedom of religion with like equity or equality of religion. Like, there are certain religions that you may believe in someone's freedom to practice it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all religions are made the same. Where he says, like, Jainism, is that what it is? That like you shouldn't harm any living being at all. He's like joking. He always makes a joke that like the more extreme a Jainist, the less violent they become. Whereas you read the book like the Quran, where it's like strike down your enemies like over and over again. It's like in the Quran like 1,000 times. Like those who do not believe in Allah are worthy of just punishment. And like the more extreme you get in that, the more violent you can become. So that's like that's the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I 100%. That my thoughts probably came from Sam Harris in regards to that.
Yeah. Well, just going back really quick to the hell thing, Jordan Peterson talks about how like hell, the idea of heaven and hell. He's like, well, hell does exist. Like, that's his argument. It exists on Earth. And that by following these codes of morality, you can create heaven or hell for yourself, and it's up to you here on Earth, right? That's like kind of like the psychological approach to the Bible, is like trying to influence people to create their own heaven here on Earth. Because if you indulge in these things that you indulge in, whether it be lying or violence or anything like that, you will create a hell for yourself on Earth because of the social repugnance and the bad consequences.
Yeah, but to just tie this all back into Jake's original point with the health thing. Like, Jake, do you believe that until we would have to be more our moral views would have to be expanded, and we'd have to we'd be forced to evolve. If everybody was an atheist starting tomorrow, everybody would be forced to evolve, and their moral views would expand to where we'd be right back to a place of everybody treating each other nicely, and no sins. And do I have that kind of accurate? Just to make it a more clear example, you are an atheist, but you have a sense of moral responsibility, right? Whereas others, we take away the heaven and hell concept for them, and they say, okay, well, screw it, and go, punch people in the face or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're saying maybe give them time; they'll evolve to have the same sense of moral responsibility.
Well, that's I think people already don't actually get their morality from religion. They do it on based on intuition and social rules. So I think it's, if we actually did take our beliefs from religion, we would be behaving entirely differently. So I think people that are good, justify their actions, try to justify it with their religion, and they would be good otherwise. But there's no doubt that like psychopaths exist, and they would very much, treat others, horribly if they didn't, have this actual belief in consequences, or like objective eternal consequences. So
It's like the repentant murderer in a jail, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I that makes sense. I guess the better argument is going back to the when I'm talking about this thing is like the determinism notion. Like, if you don't have free will, and we all know that, and then I commit a crime, what does that mean? Like, fine, wasn't me. It was,
So you think that people? Okay, well, I don't believe in retribution, form of punishment, like in the justice system. Like, I don't believe in like revenge. Like, I think that's a byproduct of the belief in free will, and I definitely think that it can serve, punishment can serve two functions, as a deterrent and as a reforming process. So I don't think you have to throw out our entire legal system just because we get rid of this notion of uncaused free will.
Well, that's Robert Sapolsky, the neuroendocrinologist, right? Someone who studies the relationship between the brain and the hormones, right? Is that right? He says that, like, the way that we look back on slavery today is the way that we'll look back on the justice system, modern day justice system, because of this ultimate reality that people are controlled by their genes and brains, and like this, But yeah, like what you're saying is, like, there is a necessity to keep antisocial people out of society.
Yeah.
But punishing them further than taking away their freedom, which is a pretty big punishment, is unnecessary.
Yeah, causing suffering is only justified if it leads to a better situation. We can't just torture people in prison, as retribution for whatever they did. I think if you believe in free will, then there's no reason not to.
Well, it's weird too because we have this belief in the sacred individual, which prevents us from giving the death penalty to anyone we deem unfit to be in society, because back on the Serengeti you'd just be kicked out of the tribe and you're just dead. You won't survive on your own in the Serengeti. So now you still let these people live their lives, and so it's a huge moral quandary, if I'm even using that word correctly. I've only heard that word used after moral.
Yeah.
There's certain words that are only used together.
And a great example of what you're talking about too is the story of the guy who, I'll just tell the story. A man loved his family, loved his life, happy guy, right? No evidence of any sort of problem, and then out of nowhere he kills his wife, and then writes down how he doesn't understand why he did that, and it just made no sense, and he feels he shames himself and the whole thing, and then takes his own life, or I haven't told the story. The story is they find he has a brain tumor in his brain that's affecting his frontal cortex, so that it actually made him make the decision to kill his wife. So the brain tumor was the real murderer there, and then when the brain tumor was removed, I think I'm mixing two stories.
Right.
I think
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, he actually, before he did it, he realized that he was having these strange, violent thoughts, and he actually recommended that they do an autopsy on him, because he's like, I don't know why I'm having these impulses. This is unlike me, and I think the tumor was pressing up against his amygdala. So he was still making conscious decisions, but there is this underlying process which is just driving him. Like you guys were saying in arguments, you're not a purely logical being. You have these drives, and then you use logic to achieve them. So they found it was disrupting his amygdala.
Yeah, and I remember the story that was told in Michio Kaku's book about the brain was that King Henry VIII, who's looked upon in history famously as the really immoral king of England, that had 8 wives and he had 2 of them killed and blah 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 blah. But the story that a lot of people don't know is that he was a pretty well liked, pretty cool guy until he was 37, and he was a big jock. He loved to play sports, and I think was it a lancing accident or something, some sort of medieval sport where they almost kill each other, and he had a really bad traumatic brain injury, and then after that was just a huge asshole. So there's it's what do you make of it? What do you make of someone who was a saint and then gets in a car accident and all of a sudden is a violent outburst and cannot control themselves anymore after they recover?
Right. Do you? It's a slippery slope, because you mean the brain tumor guy, right? You find out he has a brain tumor, and you're like, oh, it's clear that this is the sole reason why he murdered his wife. Do you let that guy off? And I know a lot of people are inclined to say yes, but think about what could happen then. Anybody that gets a brain tumor just goes on a fucking murdering rampage. It's possible, and they do it because they know that they can get off. Oh, I got a free pass to do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
Right. There's if I'm remembering correctly, there's a notion in law about I think it's ex ante and ex post, which is the ways of looking at a crime or disagreement in terms of what was happening before, and also how it can set a precedent for future interactions. Mm-hmm. So you have to take into consideration how the way we set up society is going to actually affect people's logical decisions. If it's going to lead people to make the same mistakes again, then it can't be allowed. That's why I think we can still hang on to this legal justice system without the notion of free will.
Like you could look at how the justice system attempted to like deter people from stealing songs online, where millions and millions and millions of people stole songs online, and then there was like one guy who the FBI busted down the door and was like, freeze, and then like that guy goes to jail and like owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for downloading like 3 songs. And they're like trying to discourage people from doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like basically setting examples of some people.
Yeah.
Do you guys know Charles Whitman had a brain tumor? By the way,
Really?
yeah, like a tiny little brain tumor. The autopsy showed it's a famous serial killer.
Huh.
In case you didn't know, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking as I said that. Do you think that the Vegas killer? I wonder. Do you think that he maybe had some kind of brain tumor? The Vegas shooter.
Man, I don't know. Did he shoot himself in the head?
He's screwed up. We might not know.
That we'll never know.
If it was a really obvious tumor, they could still probably figure it out, right?
I don't.
Yeah, I was making a joke, Mike.
Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, I think that you have to, like, even in because you're right, Jake. Even you don't need free will for that. Even in a determinism, everyone believes in determinism. The idea that the law being out there that you will have the death penalty if you murder a bunch of children, that is part of that causation, part of that influence in your lack of free will to where you won't do that.
I mean, this is a more. There is a right answer to this question, but I'm pretty sure that the death penalty doesn't really. It's not very effective as a deterrent. Most criminals would rather get the death penalty than face life in prison. As far as I know, I think that's statistically true.
Oh, okay. Well, then what about like some kind of torture for like instead of we the hell on earth, like we make our own hell. Like if you murder children, we're going to strap you to a board and torture you for every day for 6 years. Would that cause less torture? If determinism, right, was the well-known truth.
So it's more important that people believe there will be consequences than actually having the consequences, right? So I mean, in theory, we could, say like if you do this, you're going to be tortured for the rest of your life, and then not actually do it. As long as the belief that it's being done, the deterrent would still remain intact.
As far as I know, jails are made up. I've only seen them on TV. I don't even know that they exist or not. Never been to one. So, because that's like so you're kind of talking about like the overall story that we tell people about our society.
Yeah, yeah. It's like Big Brother. Like he might not always have to be watching, on your camera. If NSA is watching us right now, we don't know. But the fact that they could be, affects your decision-making process. So,
yeah.
So, Jake, where did memes come from?
Transition. I believe
That was seamless.
I believe it's short for memetics, which I think was coined by Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist. And he's proposing the idea that we can look at ideas and cultural norms and everything like that as almost like distinct like entities with interests. Even if they're not conscious, they have the same fundamental process as natural selection. So ideas that are better adapted to be like spread and remembered among people, it's more likely to continue.
As an example, like the lava lamp was a meme of the 70s. Like everyone sees a lava lamp and they're like, oh, like that survived. Somehow people were like, I want a lava lamp, and then it just became like it just swept the nation. Everyone had to have a lava lamp, and then they went away, but now it's like a meme of the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Well, and it comes from the word mimetic, right?
Yeah.
Which is you describe as like a virus in a way.
I'm trying to remember. It's a combination of like Greek for what is it? Copy or thought? I don't know. It's a combination between genetics and some Greek word for like thought or something like that.
Is it mimosa?
Mimosa, I think that's it. No. It's just basically taking an evolutionary, looking at our ideas and cultures through an evolutionary lens, and thinking like, perhaps these ideas actually have, the same driving forces that our genes do.
But here's the thing: memes have to be embedded in genes, right? Because it's our genes which determine which memes hang around.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that the same way you look at an organism in its environment.
Yeah.
So you could say like a meme is an organism in the environment of the human brain, or rather, human brains. The way we interact and spread memes.
Okay. Memes can be anything from a cartoon on the internet to like a house.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty broad idea, and unfortunately, there's not. It's really difficult to do any like actual science on this. So I think it's just, at the very least, it's a really interesting way of looking at things. We might need like a Darwin type, genius to pioneer, some what's it called, taxonomy for memes and ways to actually like, more accurately define them. But it's so difficult because, one, it's like basically part of what we are, and it's very fluid. Like an organism has generally really well defined characteristics, but and that makes it a lot easier to actually like study biology. But that's what makes it so difficult with memes.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about a genius who should study this. I mean, all you have to do is ask me, and I'll get started. I'll get it going.
I remember you saying though how it would like a meme acts as a virus in the way it like how an idea is a virus that affects someone's brain.
Yeah, like why is everyone dabbing? Like it spreads like a virus, right?
Yeah.
Like how does that work?
I think it's just a good, even if it's not like literally accurate, I think it's definitely a very close analogy. Like if you look at an idea, it spreads, almost identically to a disease. You come into contact with this information, which in a virus would be stored in its DNA and the way it interacts with you, but in a meme it would be in the information of the communication itself. So I think it's just that the way it spreads is just very similar to a lot of things we see in biology.
Jake, I got a question for you.
I have an answer.
If you're talking to the average Joe, who's just going about his business, just trying to make a living, just doing his thing, and he asks you, why should I be honest, or why should I care about being truthful? What do you say to him?
I don't know. And it depends on what beliefs he has in the first place.
Well, no, you don't know this person. You have one chance to what's the underlining main reason you should be honest?
Yeah. Well,
I'd say
it's the right thing to do. And then
but why?
Yeah, exactly. Then I'd have to know how he thinks that it might not be the right thing to do necessarily. How he's not going to face any consequences. I'd say, it depends on what he, what specific, reaction he has to hearing that it's the right thing to do.
What if he says, "No, it's not. You can't tell me what to do."
And I'd say, all right.
No. Put yourself in someone's shoes that cares about how it happens at this average show. Yeah, in general. Okay, doesn't have
Like
to be...
message to our listeners. Jake.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why should
Billboard.
people be honest? Why should they
Billboard
stop
styles.
lying?
Well, it's kind of predicated on I don't know. There's so many ways to answer this question, but
Take your time. Michael can edit the pauses out.
Yeah, I think we might need to edit this part out. But
No worries.
Let's just cut.
Cut. Wait.
I may or may not cut this. This is interesting to people. People love this stuff.
What is he gonna say?
The Venezuelans.
You got 7,000 Venezuelans listening to you right now. Just wondering what you're going to say about truth and lying.
Por favor.
Ironically, their leader, what's his name? I forgot his name. Cesar Chavez?
Mr.
No,
Venezuela.
Cesar Chavez. What's the guy's name?
Oh, do you mean he's dead? But what's
Yeah,
his name?
the dead guy.
Chavez? Is it just Chavez?
Chavez. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his
Chavez.
first name. Hugo.
Yeah,
Hugo? No.
Hugo.
That sounds right.
Is that right?
That sounds
Hugo
right.
Chavez. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hugo Chavez was a liar. That was a really, really, really weird way of tying Venezuelans. I don't know. Anyway,
We
Jake,
forget you
truth.
people. Well, the reason I'm so interested in this is because I was listening to, it's like at the core of like what it's like the question I'm most interested in right now, and I remember listening to Jordan Peterson talk about this, and he said, it's not blatantly obvious why it's not a good idea to lie in the first place. Like the reason it's so hard to answer is, or the reason it's so interesting is because it's so hard to answer. But I think what you were talking about is like instinctually we know these social morals, and we instinctually know, and we instinctually feel bad when we lie to people. And I'm wondering where that comes from. And like what I intuitively think is that it has to do with, obviously it has to do with evolution, it has to do with survival. Like, it's easier to organize a social group based on honesty than it is on lies. Like, you can develop more trust with people.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead, Jake.
It's it's a lot easier to see how honesty as a like societal norm is beneficial. Like that's deadly apparent. But what the question I'm trying to answer, and that I'm mostly failing to, is not that I am. It's just I'm failing to put it into words. Is how I can convince basically a purely self-interested psychopath not to lie when it's in his best interest.
Are you assuming that average Joe is a psychopath?
Well, if the average Joe isn't, then he would accept the notion that it's the right thing to do. So it's not too interesting. Like, obviously, lying, it's going to lead to harm, in most cases.
Yeah.
So that's not really the interesting question. Is honesty a value which is self-serving, and that's mostly what we would need to address. I think a practical way of looking at it is depending on the lie, like obviously, like people lie literally all the time, but depending on, how and when and the nature of the lies that you tell, it's just going to be more work to maintain, and you're going to fail eventually, just statistically, to maintain these lies. The web of lies that you have to try and live. So you can argue that it's in your best interest to be as honest as possible. So if the Nazis knock on your door or asking if you're hiding Jews, you don't need to be honest. You can obviously lie, but I think it's definitely just practically self-serving interest. It's just easier to tell the truth as much as possible.
Yeah, I think from a perspective of, like, let me lie to make people like me, which is, I think, an epidemic, right? Right now, and so many ways of looking at that. Let me lie to get, this girl to like me or get more friends or stuff, and I've come to learn that it's so much more effective to tell the truth, because people have a natural lie detecting radar.
Yeah, the bullshit radar.
Yeah, and it's unconscious. Like, part of you, just no matter what, even if you're the greatest liar in the world, a part of you feels that, and then you start to distrust that person. When you lose trust, you're not as you don't have a real relationship, right? With a friend or a family member, or the other thing it does is it filters out. It saves time, in my mind. I mean, this would be my best argument to the average Joe is, wouldn't you rather not waste time with, if someone was lying to you to get you to like them, right? And then eventually you're going to find out who they are, and you decide that you don't like them, or you decide that you're not, compatible. Wouldn't you rather just know who someone is in your first interaction?
Yeah.
And the reason I use this is because they're little lies. They're little things that we don't say to someone when we first meet them, right? Even something like, "How are you?" Mm-hmm. Good. How are you? Right? What if we were at a place of, "How are you?" Well, actually, not having a great day. I just, my mom yelled at me earlier, because of the, someone got cancer. I don't know, something just very deep, and it's you share something something very deep with a stranger or an acquaintance. You can all of a sudden bond you. Right? Or make you realize that, I don't want to talk to that person again.
right. That's the fear behind it is they're going to be like, that guy is such a downer.
Yeah. How are you?
Thank God someone cares.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you want to do that when you're buying coffee and there's a whole line behind you.
Well, the funny thing is people aren't really asking that question.
Yeah.
It's more of a hello. There's very few people when they say, "How are you?" They're not really asking the question. And that's the breakdown of communication.
Yeah.
But let me change the scenario then. You meet your friend for a drink, and then he's like, "Hey, this is my other friend, Steve." You're like, "Oh, hello, Steve." Right? What's up? Right? How you doing? And you start with the basic, so where do you live? What do you do? Right? But what if you change those questions with if you had one day to live, what would you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cut right to the core, and if people just told you the truth of what they're thinking, right? Even if it offended you. How many times have you agreed with someone just because you don't want to deal with okay, well, I'm not about to open up a philosophical debate with this random person that I barely know.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, you and I are exceptions. We'll open up a debate with anybody. I just got into an hour-long debate in the subway earlier. But
with who?
This man who it was about Trump. I don't want to get into it.
Oh,
It was more to, I was on one, and I wanted to challenge. I wanted to stimulate some juice before I had this podcast.
You were like going around. You were like one of those guys who goes around looking for a fist fight, except it's like a philosophical fight.
Oh, 100%.
Oh my god, that's a funny one. That's like spot on.
But from a philosophical debate.
Yo, bro.
Oh man, it's
It
hot
actually
today.
could be,
What are you trying to say? Global warming?
The drive actually could be like related.
Yeah. Well, you're a
What?
communist? Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool, bro.
The like competitive nature, like you want to like defeat your opponent intellectually.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is funny because I just went on a big truth rant, but sometimes truth isn't always necessary in defeating someone from an argumentation perspective or a persuasive perspective.
Yeah, and then we actually had a debate about that, which is what do you consider winning? Do you consider winning like a bunch of people agreeing with you, like the majority of people agreeing with you, or do you consider winning getting closer to an objective truth, which is harder because then there's no such people's idea of objective truth isn't the same.
Yeah, you use the example, the analogy of the pencil surfboard.
Pencil surfboard. Oh yeah. Like, if you were debating, there's an object in front of a blind person, and it's up to you and me to convince them one way or the other that, say it's a surfboard. It's my job to convince the blind person that there's a surfboard in front of them, and they're not allowed to touch it. And your objective is to convince them that there's a pencil in front of them. Like, if you win in convincing that blind person it's a pencil, you won, sort of, but you also lost. So there's two ways of looking at debates, because you lost because it's not a surfboard, it's a pencil. I don't know, I mix those up, but.
So we argued about this exact analogy for like 3 hours, because I said no, you win, right? The consensus is how you measure who won the argument, and Michael said no, the truth. Whoever's closer to the truth is the person who wins the argument, and that's the reason we should all argue.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that statement, by the way, is beautiful, right? And I think that I took a lot from that. I took a lot from that idea of like the entire reason that we argue is to get closer and closer to the truth.
Right.
But argumentation, you can look at it as a sport too. Like, there's a reason we play devil's advocate. I mean, I guess there's two reasons. One, for to stimulate the other person's, stimulate them intellectually, right? And then one for pure sport. And that's, I think, my problem is I fall into the let me just argue with you to see if I can win.
Right. Well, that's the you can almost separate the two. You can say argument and then persuasion. Persuasion is like, I think, what more you're talking about.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
but then again, persuasion is a fundamental thing about argumentation in the first place. So it's like, can you persuade someone to believe your version of the truth? And is your version closer to objective reality? Well, I don't know. What is objective reality? So it's easier to base things off of who won based on a consensus, because it's like more concrete. It's like more people agree with me, so therefore I won. Because then you can't say it's just harder to get into why the truth, or it's harder to define what the truth is.
Exactly. So if like a salesperson is trying to sell you the pencil, right? And like I'm trying to persuade you that this is the greatest pencil in the world. So I say, hey, this is the greatest pencil in the world. It will enhance your life in every way. I know that you normally only spend $1 on pencils, but you should spend $10 on this one. It's amazing, right? And they buy that pencil. I don't really believe that pencil's worth $10, yet I sold it for $10, right?
Right.
So I used deception and I lied in order for self gain, right? Kind of like Jake was saying. However, there's another way of looking at that, is if I got you to believe that the pencil will change your life, then it will.
Yeah.
So did I do anything wrong? My answer is no. I think that that level of persuasion it actually makes the lie true, and now it's the truth.
That is so weird. I don't even know what to think about that.
I do. I totally disagree.
Good.
Because if that was, if you actually preach that, then what's going to happen is you're going to get a society full of snake oil salesmen, and maybe you'll in that individual interaction, you'll convince someone that'll help them, and they'll believe it, and the placebo will actually work. But then you're going to get more and more snake oil salesmen everywhere, and the net effect is going to be negative.
But Jake, placebos do work. Let's just
sure
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So, but placebos only work because it's based on a lie.
Yes.
And as long as you believe my lie, then it's a truth.
No.
Yes. No. If I give you the old cartoon, right, of I give you a confidence pill, or I give you, hey, if you swallow this pill, you'll get any girl you want, right? All girls will love you. And the guy swallows the sugar pill, and then all of a sudden he gets the girl, right? Because he's more confident, because he thinks that it's working, so he acts more confident. But as soon as you tell him the truth that it's not the sugar pill, right, then that goes away.
Okay, so maybe he goes out and he thinks, all right, I'm irresistible, and this girl says no to me, and then he's like, well, she's just playing hard to get. She wants me really because I took this pill, and it's must be true. And then you get into a different, whole different problem about believing something different than reality.
Fine, but let's call it a confidence pill then, right? Like this gives you more confidence. This will help your social anxiety. You take this pill and you'll be able to be less introverted and talk to people without getting anxious. And it's just a sugar pill, right? The agent takes the pill and then he begins to break out of his social anxiety. He's like, oh my gosh, this is working, right? He's not as introverted. He's not as shy. He talks to strangers. He just is more confident walking around in life feeling good, right? The lie made that thing true. And as long as it remains a lie, it will remain true.
All right. Then, I accept that with like a caveat. Like if you have to acknowledge that with every lie, there is going to be some downside, and that'll differ from situation to situation. But there are, probably at least equally a number of downsides as there are, upsides to believing something that's, believing a placebo, and going on the notion that if you can convince someone that that this thing is going to make them more confident, and you use that as a rule, that it's it's always a good thing if it seems like it has a good effect, then you're going to you're going to be imbalanced, and you're going to fail to realize the value of actually being true or honest. So at least there's a balance.
Okay, fine. Let me use a different analogy then.
Okay.
Have you ever been to a wine tasting?
No.
Michael, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. So at the end of the day, wine is just fermented grapes. Like that's all it is, and it all comes from one species of Vitis vinifera grape species. And I would argue that the reason why wine will taste better is based off how well one sells it. Right. So now we're talking more preference. If I tell you that this is the greatest wine in the world, right? I mean, let's say I got some a $10 bottle, and I sit there and I'm the greatest salesman in the world, and I tell you that I break down the taste and the flavors and the aromas and how amazing it is, and and then you take that sip and you're ready to believe how amazing it is. It's going to taste better. Like a lie can make food taste better. It can make clothes look better. Right, and I shouldn't say lie, but maybe a little bit of lying with the persuasive speech, and that makes it true because taste is real.
All right, yeah. I mean, I'm not denying that. don't know. Do you want to jump in?
Well, yeah, it's like that's personal preference. I don't know. It comes down to the question of influencing again. Like that's an
Okay, but
yeah. Go ahead.
so to clarify the personal preference thing, let's say that it's not my preference, right? I don't believe this is the greatest tasting, wine in the world. You, ignorant to anything about wine, right? I bet I can make him enjoy the taste. And me not like me lying against my own belief of I think it tastes like shit, right? And I say, oh, this is the most amazing tasting thing I've ever put my mouth on. I've been studying wine for 50 years, also a lie, right? I've traveled around the world and tasted everything, right? Also a lie. And this wine is the greatest thing I've ever discovered. This wine will make you believe in God. It's amazing. Right? That's a pretty good pitch, by the way. I should remember that.
Yeah.
And then I hand you the wine, right? And you sip it, and you're like, oh, that because of the lies I told, the several lies, you will have a better experience. And it also now makes it a truth.
But that's someone who buys into your persuasion.
Yes, into my lies though.
But
and someone who buys into my lies, it's now a truth. That's my point, and I think that's part of Jordan Peterson's point. Is it makes things true. Like lies do make things true.
But sorry, but like okay, so you're in sales. Would you say that you're successful most of the time, or less than 50% of the time on selling someone something? Just as a general rule of sales, is it like
less?
It's less, right?
Yes.
So that means the majority of people didn't buy into your greatest wine ever pitch.
Yes.
So a lot of people know that it's probably not true. And or a matter of preference.
Yeah, I grant that.
You're biasing the argument based on one person accepting and taking your pitch of something as truth.
Well, how great of a persuader can make it not a one person, but 40% of the population,
right?
Or 45%.
But the point being that there's something if you take money out of the equation, if everyone who you're pitching to can afford it, there's something that that's a good chunk of people know about your sales pitch that they're like, they understand it is not to be true, because it is a matter of preference. So there's like there's a fraction of the population that you can convince and mold their preference based on your influence.
Okay, yes, but it's not always a minority. I mean, you asked me the question of in the world of sales. I mean, because salespeople are also talking to just an outrageously high number of people. Yeah. But I'll give you one that's a majority: religion. I mean, you have the majority of people who believe in this lie, right?
Uh-huh.
So I guess that's my best argument for what you said.
I just mean that there's something at a lower like something if reality is built like a pyramid, where like your experience of life is at the tip of the pyramid and the laws of physics being at the bottom of the pyramid, like there's something below your pitch of this wine, something like your pitch of the wine is somewhere on the pyramid, and the nature of wine and people's understanding of reality and their understanding of everyone has different preferences, like that's below that's lower down in the pyramid.
Right. If I can jump in, say like you convince this one person they enjoy this cheap wine, this low quality wine much more because you convince them that it's really good. So in that one particular instance of them tasting that wine, you will have done a good thing, and they would have derived more pleasure from it. But that's not a closed system. You know, they're going to go out in the future, and they're going to have the chance to taste something that's actually really high quality wine. They're going to say, no, I already know which one's the best because I've been convinced of this one right here, and they're going to be missing out on an opportunity to actually have a better one, which could on top of that be sold as much better. So they're you know,
But see, this is where I disagree.
Always has a greater effect on the way they approach reality. So
that's where I disagree, Jake. I have to. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have to jump in. His reasoning for liking the other wine better later in life could be because of the way it was described to him. Like that's my point.
No. I think I account for that. That I mean, would you agree that if you gave the same... Okay, yeah, this would be a good example. If you gave identical, pitches for crappy wine and great wine, then on average, you're going to get people enjoying the better wine much more. So...
Not necessarily. I think if you took 1,000 people, right, we'll use the experiment of 1,000 people, all of which have no knowledge on wine. One bad wine, one good wine. And you have the greatest salesperson in the world describing the bad wine, and nobody describing the other wine. I think the majority of that 1,000 people admit they like the bad wine. Because once you believe that it's going to be better, it becomes better. Like, I think you forget the power of belief.
Well,
and how that changes, it makes things real. It becomes physical.
I don't think I do, or I think I do account for that, because I mean, a more easy example to argue for is in medicine, where especially with drugs that affect your experiences. So like psychological drugs for like treating anxiety or depression or things like that. The effectiveness of a medicine is controlled against placebos. So, placebos work and you should use them, but it's only, that only takes you so far. You're only going to get, you're going to, if you only rely on placebos, you're going to be missing out on an actual much greater benefit that you could more truthfully have.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but I think there is a difference between something physical. Like the wine analogy is really I was trying to tie back into religion or determinism or things that aren't such so correlated, I guess, like so physical, so so factual, and that's I mean, ultimately, when you can't prove it, right? When you can't do a medicine versus placebo test, because it's something like preference or it's something like theology. Then the best persuader becomes the truth.
Well, no, that's why I used psychological medicines, for improving mood, because that is a subjective preference that's measured subjectively, just like wine,
But isn't it? I mean, isn't there drugs that release like dopamine and serotonin that is more physical, more chemical? That I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, but I think either way, though, the point is you can measure it. Like in your example of the medicine, even if it's affecting moods, you can measure such thing. But when it comes to preference, you can't really measure it. The only way to do it is based off of a consensus. I think that can be more easily manipulated by persuasive language.
I can't tell where we disagree.
That's one of his tricks.
Well, it's because you came off so aggressive with me in the beginning. Michael said, "I don't know how to answer that," and then Jake said, "I do. I totally disagree."
Well, the way you were presenting it was that, the placebo always trumps the truth.
Donald Trump's?
Yeah.
Hey yo.
And I'm just saying that there's always going to be a downside to any given false belief, whether or not that manifests itself immediately.
And there are situations where the better thing is a lot more clear than wine. Like the spectrum from a bad wine to a good wine. I mean, I'm not a wine expert, but I assume the great wines taste a lot better than bad wines, but that the spectrum is kind of small. Like it's not that big a difference. It still tastes like grapes and alcohol. There's like where there's other scenarios. There's other things that people try to persuade or try to sell that there is clearly a better, cheaper, more efficient option, and then it becomes a matter of like the matter of truth really becomes more of a moral significance in that regard. Like where the salesman, it's like the salesman trying to persuade knows even more so than the wine that what they're selling is it's probably not the best thing, right? So there's scenarios.
But like a T-shirt salesman, right?
Uh-huh.
Like if he sells you on this shirt will make you look great and make you get more women. I mean, this is a perfect analogy. This shirt will get you to sleep with more women. Mm-hmm. It's going to make you look so good. And if you believe that, then because you believe it, you may actually sleep with more women. But it has nothing to do with the T-shirt. It has everything to do with the confidence that you now have, right? But it's paradoxical because that salesman made that lack of truth into a truth by saying it, by simply saying it.
But it's a ticking time bomb because unless that person asks to be buried in their casket in that shirt, where they go their whole life with believing this lie of the shirt, the eventually they're going to be like, wait, it had nothing to do with the shirt. It was all about psychology the whole time. And
that's a more accurate way of doing that. Like if you can convince someone that believing that confidence is key, and that if you just act that way, you will feel that way, then that's a much more honest and truthful way to potentially reap the same reward of placebo. If you just say, act confident, you will feel confident, and that is entirely true, and you're not attaching any false beliefs along with it that involve, shirts.
Which is
I agree with that. I agree with that. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, which is another thing that I think is so a big reason why people have trouble being honest is because they're not honest with themselves most of the time. So if you can hit a aha moment in your life where you're like, wow, I've told a lot of lies in my life, and then you're like, okay, well, I think the reason why I tell people lies is because I also lie to myself, because it's easier for me to live my life if I lie to myself, which to some extent everyone does. So, but once you have that realization, then you can also realize that you can lie to yourself in healthy ways, and like I have the power to be confident at any moment. Like you can only reach that conclusion if you don't believe that outside forces like a T-shirt are exacting that on you.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, but I do want to make sure I'm clear here on the. Even if I tell you this T-shirt will get you to get laid more and make more friends, and you wear the T-shirt because you believe.
Where's this T-shirt, by the way?
That
might be interesting.
I have a box full. I got 5 left. They're $500 a piece.
Only 5?
Only 5. Now it's 4. Which one is?
Do I have until the end of the day to make a decision?
Absolutely. I do take payment. All right, so what was I saying? All right, so in the T-shirt analogy, though, because I do agree with both of you, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this, though. If I sell you the T-shirt on the false belief that this will guarantee you get laid, you believe my lie. In turn, because of the increased confidence level, you do get laid, right? And then afterward, if I say, hey, by the way, it wasn't the shirt. That thing's just some cheap cotton, right? You had that in you the whole time. That's the truth, right? That is a better message, right? Like Jake was saying earlier, and I agree that message should be brought up. But it was the initial lie that was able to convince the subject that he had said confidence in him the entire time.
Which, by the way, is a story that you see all the time. Like you see
All
that,
the time.
You see that in
cartoons, I didn't make this shit up.
Movies. Yeah.
We grew up with this.
This is like Disney. Yeah.
All right, well then I'll harken back to when you were talking about cutting through the bullshit with social interactions. You can do that the same way with yourself in these placebos. So I mean, that's just adding extra steps. You know, I don't think it's, you know, proven or I don't know if it's been tested if it's necessary to. Actually, I think I remember reading about a thing that even if you know something's a placebo, it still works. They've actually done a test where they say this thing is a placebo. It will not affect you in any way, but I'm going to give this to you, and you know it basically just acts as, you know, it's more of like just a ritual. So the actual object of the placebo is irrelevant, even if you know it's false. You know, that's why people will wear their lucky shirt on game day. You know, because it makes them feel better, and they, you know, all this stuff like that.
That's
even
a great
if they
analogy.
knew, it has no effect on reality. So.
Okay.
The actual lying is unnecessary and potentially harmful.
That's a good argument, because you're right. People know the superstitious stuff. They absolutely will acknowledge, no, I know it's bullshit and has no meaning, but then they immediately do the thing anyway.
Yeah. I still read fortune cookies because it's, you know, fun and like, oh, you're really likable and everyone likes you. It's like, oh, cool. It's kind of fun to read, even if I know it has nothing to do with reality.
Oh, I will destroy and just berate how horribly stupid astrology is, like birthdays and signs and stuff.
Yeah.
I'll just go at it, and then I'll read my daily horoscope.
Yeah.
I will tell everybody how stupid it is and how stupid they are for believing it, and then I'll read it.
But
That's
I
because
think
you're trying to align your chakras.
I think that's the ultimate. I think, you know, astrology is the ultimate outcome of having that mindset that you're defending. So in a way, it defeats its own claim because the ultimate effect is going to be, you know, net negative. That if you're, you know, you sign up, you know, your shirt selling, you know, scheme is basically just another version of astrology, and you know, I think that's mostly going to have a negative effect because people will actually believe it's true, and that'll, you know, hinder their learning about, you know, actual truths that can help them.
Yeah, and there's like talking about like lying to yourself about things. I think this is like something that I'm really interested in too, is that beliefs have such a profound impact on your life. Even something as a small belief such as people drown in water, therefore water is dangerous, and I don't like to go swimming very often. Like, you know, it's not that big of a. It doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It's like, okay, you tend not to go to swimming pools. When you go to the beach, you kind of hang out on the sand and stuff like that. Whatever. But like scale that up to a belief like, you know, belief in hell or a belief in heaven, a belief that people are fundamentally evil, or a belief that it's impossible to get something that you want out of life. Like these, like smaller beliefs, you know, a belief system is what we have in our heads. So getting to the a more fundamental idea of truth will help someone to break down bad beliefs quicker.
Yeah, it's kind of like the reason you argue for sport, because you're refining your ability to argue or debate, and that's like just another version, just on an internal level, of, you know, not falling into these biases, like these tons of biases that people have, you know, learning to and becoming better at seeing through those, and through seeing through self-deception.
So here, like I want to say two things. One is, I think that you're absolutely right. Being honest with yourself is key to everything we're saying. Right? Everything that we've talked about. If there's one message out there, it's be honest with yourself. And like you said earlier, Mike, most people are not, unfortunately. They may not even realize it. In fact, most of us do not realize it. But then the other part of me says sometimes it is necessary to lie to yourself, and sometimes that's called optimism. And optimism's good. Like a false belief in something can make you better, right? And lying to yourself about some false expectations or something about yourself or something you want to accomplish, like even though like deep down you're like, I don't, this isn't true, right? And you just squash that and just keep telling yourself, the lie. It's like that. There's a reason they say fake it till you make it, right? Like eventually you become that lie. You become what you've been telling yourself.
Yeah, but there's different hierarchies. Like make it. I'm doing bunny
quotations.
Bunny rabbit ears with my hands.
What did you call it?
Bunny rabbit.
Bunny
ears?
rabbit ears.
Yeah.
I'm always gonna call it that from now on. I'm not even gonna do the quotations though. I'm just gonna say bunny rabbit ears, and then say the thing I want to put in quotes. And bunny
rabbit ears.
Begin bunny rabbit ears. Bake it till you make it, and bunny rabbit ears. All right, sorry. Go on.
No, I was saying that I mean, actually, that idea of optimism is a really good point. But that, like, faking it, you might be able to climb wherever you're trying to make it, bunny rabbit ears, make it. And you might be able to reach that place. Like, that, okay, I agree with you. But there's certain things that you can't fake. And like, for instance, there's certain professions and certain ways of making a living that you can't fake things.
Investing.
Yeah, investing.
I would argue optimism is only going to be, bad if you're trying to make a profit, on investing in a company. You want to be as close to reality as possible, even if, like there are cases where optimism is, beneficial, but
yeah,
but that's more an outlier than it is, a rule, or it's more of an exception than it is a rule.
Yeah, and journalism used to be an example of this. Now you can kind of lie and get away with it, and people will forget about it. But it used to be if you not even if you told a willing lie, but if you made a mistake in your news story, that was the end of your career. So there's just different hierarchies. It just depends on what you want out of life, based on how you get there, using the truth or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, to use another analogy, if I'm overweight, right, optimism, like faking it, saying that I'm not overweight, it's good and bad, right? The good is that I can still be happy with and comfortable in my own skin, right? And I'm just keep telling myself, I lie to myself, say that I'm not overweight, and that'll keep my confidence level up and keep my mood up, right? My stress level contained. But the harmful part is I don't end up losing weight, and I don't end up living a healthy life. So I agree with you guys with that optimism and faking it until you make it can be is not always beneficial, because if I just admit to myself that I'm overweight, and someone else tells me they don't want to lie to me either, hey, you're overweight, right? And I believe the truth that I am, then that's the thing that's needed for me to lose the weight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to admit it first. You need to identify the problem before you can start solving the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll grant you that it can be harmful, but I think it's important.
No, that it's more harmful than it is helpful. Is what I'm arguing.
In that example, but there are examples where it's more healthy than it is harmful.
Yes, but you can't accept that optimism as a default mode of being, because it's more often bad than it is good.
What's the saying? Hope for
Okay,
the best,
well,
prepare
so-
for the worst.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Say it again.
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That's the...
Yeah.
And you have to know, and you have to be honest if you're going to know what like, in the act of preparing, you have to understand what the worst case scenario is. And if you are only hoping for the best and only preparing for the best, then you're going to be FUCKED. Duh.
You know, there's a study that was relating people who are realist and correlating it with pessimism. and I've actually been looking at this a lot lately because it's the go-to thing when you point out to anybody and you say you're a pessimist, right? They say no, I'm a realist, right? But you never hear that when you say you're optimistic. They say, no, I'm realistic. Right? But there's a lot of truth to it because it's like the old, the classic, this glass is half empty, right? You are correct. It is half empty, right? I'm not being pessimistic. I'm being a realist. It is half empty, right? And so there's this whole study of people who say they're realists are actually pessimists. I just find it interesting because I don't think that whoever conducts these studies know what like realism. I think that realism is lost. Like, I don't think anybody's actually a realist except for maybe Jake.
I'll counter with a different study that demonstrated that people who what is it? Like self-identify with pessimism, I think it was, have a more accurate perception of the way of the way they perceive like people's opinions of them. So when asked to rate someone's friendliness or looks or whatever, people who self-identified as pessimistic were more likely to have an accurate estimation of what how they were rated.
Interesting.
I would believe that, but because pessimistic people are probably more in tune with that and more insecure with their. Like, I think optimistic people don't give a fuck what other people think of them.
That's interesting. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, exactly.
See, like people who whatever their personality makeup is that tend towards pessimism are generally more unlikable.
Okay, I think it was like.
Sorry, that was go on.
I don't think that's true, or at least I don't think that would be the case in this study. I don't remember well enough to, point to why that is. But I think it was a more objective measurement than it was like friendliness. But that's the best remember that I can remember that I took away from it.
Tom, have you ever heard the phrase "real recognize real"?
No, but I love it. First time hearing it, big fan. Break it down for me, Mike.
Break it down. It's just a slang saying for like honest people can recognize other honest people. And it's like the inverse of you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Yeah.
Because like people can recognize, like, if liars recognize liars, honest people recognize honest people.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, stop doing that.
Sorry.
For the record, I 100%, like, every fiber in me, like, believes that our world will be better if everybody was just honest. Like, everything would be fixed if we're all just honest with each other. I'm simply pointing out why. Because if you say lying is just this universally horrible thing, right? Like, if that was true, then I don't think it would be as common. But it's not, and that's the point I was making. Is it is not only useful, but there's good to it, like the examples that I've been giving. Yes, I agree, Jake, that if we cut it out completely, our world would be a better place.
I actually don't.
Now you're just being a dick.
I'm just being honest.
Oh, God.
Oh, no. Verbal black belt. He's just toying with us. Yeah, well, actually, before I let you go on that, I think there needs to be a balance of optimistic and pessimistic people. Because to progress, you need optimism.
Diversity makes us stronger.
Ooh. Is that what you were going to start getting at? Is that what you were going to get to when you said you disagree?
No, it's just
You're just making a joke.
Well, no, it's the same. And that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry, my throat's itching. We're going to sacrifice the pig now. This is the part of the show where we sacrifice the pig. For it is the blood of the pig that... I'm good.
But, I've never heard an argument, Jake, against hope. Like, I think it was Stephen Hawkins who said, like, where there's hope, there's life. And isn't that what optimism is?
Yeah, but he can't even walk.
Okay. Well, we don't need to to just take unnecessary jabs at old hockey. Okay.
There's a Cards Against Humanity card that's Stephen Hawking talking dirty.
Old.
Yeah.
Good old Walking Hawkins.
Walking Hawkins.
What is with this bashing of Hawk? I don't know why I'm calling him Hawk either. I felt like giving him a cool nickname to defend him. The Hawk.
Nighthawk.
Nighthawk. Electric Hawk. Because, his chair. All right, anyway. Jake.
Big Hawk.
Hope. Optimism. Why are you trying to take that from everybody?
What is hope?
Oh, God.
Optimism.
What is?
I do think those are synonyms, though. Hope and optimism. Or positive thinking.
Yeah. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Boom.
That's it.
Mike, drop it again.
So nice to say
one more time before the show ends, Mike. I want you to say that much.
All right, get ready, ladies and gentlemen. The quote of the day.
I really think we just don't disagree.
I think we're all in agreement.
I think this is one of those cases where, like, you present something that is, like, slightly misinterpreted, and then I present the counter of that, and then you respond to my counter as perceiving it, because, I think we both just agree, and we're just, basically disagreeing with, we actually agree, but we're just disagreeing because we're both presenting one side.
You're absolutely right. Michael told me, we got into I don't remember this, Mike, like a 4-hour-long debate about religion. I took the side of religion is useful. Mike took the side of it's harmful. And it was like a 4-hour all-night thing. And at the very end of it, he go because I kept trying to trap him, just to get try to get him to contradict himself. And even though it had nothing to do with the original point, and so once I got him to contradict himself for a second, I was like, ha, I got you. And it took him like 3 seconds. It was 3 seconds of silence before he goes, yeah, but that wasn't the original point. And he's like, all you're doing is you're just changing, you're just agreeing with what I'm saying, and then making a different point, and making it sound like it's in disagreement. Yeah. And I didn't even realize that I was doing that, and so I'm glad you brought it up again.
Yeah. The only thing you didn't do was give me a bad nickname. Oh, there goes Lion Mike.
Yeah,
Little Marco.
It's fine. Well, I'm glad that I think that's a good place to probably wrap this up. Is that we all agree? Or no, sorry, you pessimist. You said you didn't say we all agree. You little pessimist. You said we don't disagree. I hate that. So what you're saying is we agree. We all agree. See, my optimistic personality says we all agree and love each other.
No, yeah. More letters, more words involved in saying.
Great. I mean, that's neither here nor there.
One question, Jake, I have for you. Another question. Is The Matrix the greatest movie ever made, and should it be required reading for all students? Required watching.
Ooh.
No.
Also, I just farted.
Damn.
So hopefully it doesn't stink up the closet.
Good thing we're not in a small enclosed space.
Good thing we're not in like a studio.
Wait, just to clear that up, he said no, Matrix is not the greatest movie of all time and should not be part of a curriculum?
Is that what you said, Jay?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's just a movie.
Jake, I do not disagree.
Cool.
I'll never not disagree.
What if The Matrix was...
He's counting on his fingers, listeners. The amount of knots I said.
We don't not disagree.
I said I never don't not disagree. Oh, no, I didn't say that.
You said you will never not disagree.
Yeah, that's what it is. I will never not disagree.
I will never not... Okay, I don't want to even get into it. My brain can't even follow this.
Wait, that still means that I agree.
I don't know
I
what
screwed
point
it up.
you were trying to make in the first place.
I was trying to say that I think The Matrix should be part of a curriculum.
Yeah. I think you're trying to turn the frickin' frogs gay.
We're all in the Matrix. Nothing is real.
Oh, Jake, this is important. Why are we not in a simulation? Why is the simulation theory that if consciousness and reality is fundamentally information, that all that information could be contained in a larger computer, like our whole universe could technically be inside of a big, doesn't even have to be a supercomputer, just a computer somewhere else, in another level of reality, in a higher level of dimension and organization. Why is that unlikely that we are in a simulation?
Occam's razor,
Boom!
Shots fired!
Occam's razor.
Razor thrown.
Philosopher of the month.
That is a logical tool to dispense with theories that present more information than necessary to explain the phenomenon.
Well, hold on. Let me jump in though. Isn't a matrix type of reality simpler than this convoluted?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Big Bang, multiple universes, theology, right? Like craziness that no one knows where the fuck we came from?
Well, no, because what you're proposing is essentially all of the same stuff, like the Big Bang beginning, all these crazy things, and on top of that, a simulation of us. Because the reality that's simulating us would have to have gone through the same exact processes and origins and questions like that. So
but I don't think Occam's razor was to talk about the amount of causal points. It was just the simplest
the number
explanation.
of assumptions that you make to eliminating any unnecessary assumptions. So what you're proposing is that all these crazy things that we might be the origin of reality. These would all apply to the upper reality that would be simulating us. So you're just adding another layer of complexity.
Maybe what it is it's something easier to wrap your head around than an idea of reincarnation or an idea of heaven or hell.
That's where I was going with it, Mike. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to believe something and attach yourself to it than it is to accept that you don't know and explore the possible options.
But I thought
anything.
Occam's razor was simply the when two competing arguments, the one that is simplest is usually correct.
The one that involves the least amount of assumptions.
Well, you're just assuming that.
Yeah.
Assuming that what?
I'm kidding. Okay.
Meaning.
All right. I don't know enough about Occam's razor to
that'd be like trying to describe gravity as through the lens of it being in a simulation, all this stuff, as opposed to just simply describing gravity itself and the way the way it works.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the same thing, just on a different scale.
So then why is Elon Musk such a big fat idiot? Because he loves talking about simulation theory.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I don't ask him.
Well, he's next on the podcast, right, Tommy?
Yeah, we're Jake's big guess. We're starting everybody down. We'll have someone small next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep emailing Elon at Tesla.com, but he hasn't gotten back to me yet.
I would say this to Elon if we met. Like, the simulation theory that he presents is fundamentally not really different from the fine tuning argument for God, which is saying that there are too many coincidences to have led to us being here for it to not have been created, pretty much.
So it's not that far off from a creation.
Oh, the watchmaker's theory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Intelligent design. I used to love that when I was younger. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, it's. I think the response is as simple as like we don't know what the outer causes of our situation being this way are, because it could literally be anything. You could propose any outer system, whether it's God or a simulation or just chaos and this is chance. We just don't know, and it should really be left at that as instead of proposing these things that can't be tested fundamentally. You can't disprove these theories, so you just don't deal with them.
So, I forget. I was trying to rack my brain of who the author of the thought experiment of, and I'm just saying this because I'm really curious to hear your opinion, Jake, of the I can't remember. If I die, it's better to believe in God than not, because if you believe in God, if you don't believe in God and find out He's real, you go to hell.
Oh, this is an existential argument.
Yeah, what's it called? The wager.
Yeah. Oh, Pascal's wager.
Pascal's wager.
Pascal's wager. Yeah. What's your best argument to Pascal's wager?
What it says is that no one knows if God exists, but you might as well believe that God exists, because if it happens by chance to be true, then you're not going to hell.
And just to piggyback, most Americans, would you rather have $1 or a lottery ticket, right? Type of thing. Or if it was a free lottery ticket, everybody would take it, even though your chances are 1 in 100 billion, whatever, 1 in 100 billion. You're probably not going to win the lottery. If I gave you a free lottery ticket, you would accept it, right? Like, why would you not? Why would you not? Is the kind of
I would not accept it. Well, I don't know this.
What?
Because the chances of dying in a car accident on the way to cash in your lottery ticket are higher than winning.
Damn! I can just math the shit out of me.
What if you're on a motorcycle?
Awesome. Wait, but would you really not take it?
No, I'd take it.
So anyway, Pascal's.
Oh right, yeah. The reason is because, which God do you have to believe in, and what do you have to do to gain His favor? I just read an interesting, kind of slightly more grounded argument that we have the potentially super intelligent AI coming, and if you could propose the idea of an artificial intelligence which could basically, if you don't take actions to make it come about, then in the future it will what's it called? It will punish you for not helping it to coming to existence, because it can see reality, and it has access to all these things, and it can predict the past. Basically, it can potentially read minds because it's so intelligent.
Holy moly!
So this is just another version of Pascal's wager, that having to believe this thing, so it could take an infinite number of forms, and what the details of it are, impossible to discern.
For the record, future AI, I like you, and I think I welcome your existence here. All right, there we go. I just want to say it. I just want to get it out of the way.
Smart.
Well, the Pascal's wager kind of comes down to our earlier arguments about the wine, sort of. Like, what's the downside of believing that the wine is good? Like, there's just unforeseen consequences that could be catastrophic.
Right, but the difference is the wine might not even exist.
Yeah. I mean, I think whenever time I thought of that, I would just say, okay, even if I subscribe to that, I can't just do that, though. Belief isn't a choice in a lot of ways, which contradicts, I understand, my earlier argument of fake it until you make it and lying to yourself.
And the free will thing.
Yeah. How long have we been? I feel like we went from sunflower seed fractals to sunflower seed butter to
2 hours and 25 minutes.
Determinism to lying.
And we're not even a fourth of the way done.
Yeah, this is a 10-hour episode.
And we're going to fill these hours whether you like it or not.
Whether we like it or not.
Whether we like it, whether we have anything more to say.
We should have a part of the podcast where we all go to sleep. That'd be interesting. And then we wake up together and keep talking.
Ah.
I think listeners will find that entertaining. Like, just, oh, it's silent, but they're sleeping.
Yeah, like we know
Weird.
they're sleeping.
Yeah, like Occam's razor. I don't know. I'm just saying things we've said before.
We have all our night terrors and scream out our deepest, darkest secrets.
Jake, this is like going to be a really random question, but I just feel like we're coming towards the end, and we talked about a lot of stuff, and I still, I'd love to debate you more for my own, intellectual stimulation, and I always learn every time I debate you. I think the harder I try to debate, the more I learn. And so I think it's beneficial to ask this question. If there's one single piece of advice you would give anybody in life, you're talking to all of our 7,000 listeners, mostly Venezuelan, what would it be?
Hola.
I don't know. Pursue truth.
Pursue truth. And just to clarify, because we talked about many definitions of truth, your definition of truth is?
Aligning your beliefs with the facts of reality.
Love it. Easier said than done. Do you think that you're an example of your own advice?
Yeah, I think so. I think I try to at least not lie to myself, and I want to know the truth, whether it hurts or.
Have you always been that way?
No. I think it was especially a shock when, I started realizing that I didn't know as much as I did, or as much as I thought I did about religion, about being Catholic. So when I realized that, it kind of changed the way I approach, knowledge and truth, as opposed to, believing it because it feels good. I think it's more worthwhile to, more authentic to pursue truth, no matter what the consequences are.
So for someone who wasn't fortunate enough to have the same mental, the existential breakdown that you had, what advice would you give them to kind of get them to really question the things that they've been taught, like religion?
Learn to be okay with uncertainty. We tend to want to fill in the gaps of our knowledge, even if we don't know something to be true. To learn to let go of having to have a definite belief on something.
Yeah, that's probably the best answer you could have given. I think that being okay with uncertainty is key, yet uncertainty is like the most unpleasant thing ever.
Yeah.
Like, and so I guess it's like, what's your advice on how to deal with uncertainty or to be okay with it?
Well, you got to know yourself. Everyone has a different degree of tolerance for what they can, what kind of chaos they can accept into their lives. So that's something for them to answer for themselves.
Awesome.
And it's kind of necessary to invite a little chaos in your life. Mm-hmm. You have to. Or else
If any of our listeners stuck around this long, which I'm sure we've lost a lot of them to the 2.5 hour mark, this is where we got real. This is where we give the life hacks. All right, Jake. Well, in response to all of your perfect life hacks, I guess my only argument would be, duh.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming, Jake.